22, verses 15 through 22. It might seem to you a little suspect that we should talk about this topic when so many of us are painfully aware that it's tax season. But when would be a better time to talk about taxes? And what the Bible says about taxes. What Jesus said about taxes. April 15th will arrive soon enough for those of you who still have a bill to pay to the IRS. And those of you who received a refund probably have already got that in bank. You may have already even spent it. You know, if you watch TV, there are plenty of ways you can get a whole house full of furniture. You can get a new home with only $100 down. You can get new cars, your tax refund. Everybody would like to have your tax refund if you get one. Whether you got the refund or you have to pay, if you're still getting a paycheck, there's probably a disconnect for you between what your gross pay is and what your net pay is. We ought to switch those around probably, because the net pay is kind of gross when you think about all of it that went away. Amen. Have you ever wondered what the Bible has to say about paying tax? Let's look at Jesus in this interaction with the Pharisees and some of their disciples. Beginning in verse 15, Matthew 22, 15 through 22. Then the Pharisees went out and laid plans to trap him in his words. They sent their disciples to him along with the Herodians. Teacher, they said, we know that you are a man of integrity and that you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. You aren't swayed by men, because you pay no attention to who they are. Tell us, then, what is your opinion? Is it right to pay taxes to Caesar or not? But Jesus, knowing their evil intent, said, you hypocrites, why are you trying to trap me? Show me the coin that is used for the purpose of paying the tax. And they brought him a denarius, and he asked them, whose portrait is this? And whose inscription? It's Caesar's, they replied. And then he said to them, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. And when they heard this, they were amazed, and so they left him and went away. We have a unique coin collection at our house. Some of you, it's unlike any other coin collection in the world. Mostly because the coins aren't round, they're oblong. We've got a whole stack of them in the can. And then we have two, they call them portfolios or penny passports. They're places we've been. Every place we go, Michelle, or now the kids, they want 50 cents and a penny. You take the 50 cents and that gives you the access to make a new mark on the penny. It flattens the penny out and it puts on the penny an imprint of the place where you've been. Look, we've got this one is I think the Corvette Museum in Bowling Green, Kentucky. There's one here from what's this one from? From M&M's. I don't know when we ever went to the M&M plant, but somebody went to the M&M plant. We got a coin from that. Here's one. You guys probably know this. It says New Orleans Coffee and Donuts, Cafe Du Monde. They have a penny thing there. There's one in here that's kind of special. Actually it's a nickel that has been flattened at Biloxi Beach when Michelle and the kids went there before Hurricane Katrina. that penny machine, that nickel machine, is probably sitting at the bottom of the Gulf somewhere. It's not, it doesn't exist. You can't get that one anymore. It's worth more, right? It's almost worth a nickel. And none of these are worth a penny, but you probably couldn't buy them from Michelle. Some of them, I think, go all the way back to when she was a kid, when she started collecting them. They're memories for us. There's the Louisville Zoo. There's the lighthouse at St. Augustine when we went over there. We try to find those to make a memory out of. I tell you that because it wasn't unusual in the ancient days for money to be recycled. Now, when we recycle money in the U.S., we take it back to the bank and they take it and shred it and they issue new currency. But in those days, they didn't have paper money, they just had coins. And when a new king or a new emperor or a new country would come, they would take the coins and they would heat them up, or they would just put them into a stamp, and they would stamp a new image. The old image would be obliterated, and the new image would come. And that's what we've done with these. We've just obliterated the old image. Now, in some of them, you can still see Lincoln, a little faint Lincoln, or Lincoln Memorial on the back. Most of them, you can't see anything except the stamp that's there. And I really need extra glasses in order to read what those things say. Most in the ancient world, the value of money was not really in whose face was on it, but the weight of the metal that was in it. They were gold, copper, silver. They were weighed and measured, and they had a special weight or scale that they would put on it to see if anything had been trimmed from it, anything taken off of it. It had to balance in order for those things to be there. You know, if a new emperor came in, you might be able to use the old emperor's coin for a little while, but if the new emperor had killed the old emperor, he probably didn't want his face anywhere to be seen, and so he wanted the old coinage to be taken away. They would become unwelcome, but they would be refreshed. We'll put it that way. I forgot to mention, Charles, I've got two 1908 dimes that haven't been flattened, Charles. I don't think you can buy those either. Can't get them anymore in the thing. Jesus accuses the Pharisees and the Herodians of being hypocrites. Now, why would he do that? You ever wondered what? Not just because they didn't believe what they said, not just because they told people to do stuff that they didn't want to do themselves. The Romans had their coins, the denarius. That was the Roman coin. Now, it's all over the Scripture, but it was a Roman coin. The Jews had their coins as well. The shekel was the coin for the temple. The only place it was good was in the temple, and it was the only coin that was good in the temple. When Jesus kicked the money changers out of the temple, why were they called money changers? They changed money. They took your denarii and they changed it to shekels, because in order to give an offering into the temple, you had to have shekels. You couldn't give the Roman money to God. That's what they said. Anyway, they were money changers. The only acceptable money was temple coinage. Everywhere else in the country, you could use, and you had to use, the coinage of Rome. You had to use the denarius. Everywhere else, in the marketplace, to pay your rent, to pay your debts, you use the denarius. But when you went to the temple, they said, oh, we can't use the overlord's money. We have to use special money. And they would recycle the shekels as well. But in addition to doing that, they would charge, oh, well, there's a $10 fee for currency conversion. Now, when we went to Japan a couple years ago, we had to pay a little bit in order to convert our currency from dollars to yen. And then we had to pay a little bit for whatever we had left over to convert them back, so we lost on both ends. And we got the lowest rate, not the highest rate, every time we converted. But to charge an exorbitant fee so you could give to God. That's what Rome did. They said, Rome's charging us too much money. Jesus said, talk about hypocrite. Charging people money to give to God. Now, it wouldn't have been so bad, but the whole system of changing money was set up by none other than the high priest. And he hired the people, and it was his family who were the money changers. They were hypocrites. The high priest was supposed to get his living from the temple. And he did. He just made extra on the side at the temple exchange. The people who wanted to give to God, listen, if you went in with a denarius and you wanted to give it to God, they'd check it and they'd say, well, it's only worth, instead of 5 shekels, it's only worth 4 shekels. Here, you can give to God, and we'll keep one for the exchange rate. So now, what you would dedicate to God is only worth a portion of what it was. And you have no control over the exchange rate. You have no control over how much they charge. You could walk in and they could take 10% or 20% or 50% or 80% if they wanted to. You had no control over what the charges were. Money which the average family desired to give was depleted and reduced and intercepted before it made it into the temple treasury. It landed in the pockets of the hypocrites. It was also the case that Jerusalem had a special tax attached to it. You know, there are a lot of people in Mississippi who like to set up their business in the county rather than in the city, because the city collects an extra 2%. When you go to the restaurant and you buy food, you have to pay 9% tax, even though the state sales tax is only 7%. Well, 7% goes to Jackson. 2% goes to the locality, but counties can't charge that. Only municipalities, only cities can charge those extra taxes. This is the same thing that happened in ancient Judea. Jerusalem, because it was the center of the uprisings, was specially ruled, and there was a special tax for that. In Galilee, where Jesus was from, there was a separate ruler, and he didn't charge the extra taxes. I think the people weren't so mad about the usual taxes. It was the extra ones in Jerusalem that kind of got them upset. One needs to understand the hypocrisy of the Pharisees and the priests. One need look no further than this issue. They were upset because the Romans charged a special tax, and yet in the temple, where God was supposed to be in charge, they charged special tax. This is a duplicity which Jesus could not stand. And if you read through the Scriptures, he went in once at the beginning of his ministry and kicked out the money changers and the people who had all the animals for sale. And then once again, at the beginning of the Holy Week, after he came in on the donkey, he came to the temple again and kicked them all out another time. Jesus understood the hypocrisy of what they were doing. Jesus refused to fall in their trap. What about the Roman inscription? Let's look at taxes then. Jesus refused to engage in partisan political wrangling. That's what we call it today. Partisan political wrangling. He cut to the heart of the matter whose image and inscription is on the coin? Who issued the coin? And if they wanted it, to whom does the coin belong, and they can take it back at any moment? It was a denarius. It was Rome. It was Caesar. And Jesus says, render to Caesar that which is Caesar. Listen, if you're going to participate in the monetary system and use that same system for your benefit, then you're going to have to live with the consequences of your action. Right? The government has every right to take your money, because if you look on it, it says property of the United States government. Now it says in God we trust, but that was an afterthought. And most people don't even think after it anymore anyway. Even if you work hard and earn the money that you get, now understand, you're not a slave to the government. The government doesn't own you. But every dollar, every nickel, every penny has the stamp and seal of the government on it. Your work and your energy and your labor and your produce don't belong to the civil authorities. And yet you desire things which only money can buy. If we were able to go back to the old days, the bygone days, the days that are no longer here, where you could barter and trade for everything you needed, then your labor would be worth something. And if you had 20 pounds of potatoes you planted and you grew and you dug up, and you wanted to take them to town and trade them for some wood or some nails in order to build a chicken coop, you got to set the price those potatoes were worth. And if the man who had the other stuff didn't think they were worth as much, you go find somebody else, the next sawmill down the road, to find somebody who would trade you for what you thought your stuff was worth. The government decides how much your money's worth now. The government wouldn't be involved in every transaction, and they wouldn't tax what you did in barter, because you traded equal for equal. You didn't gain anything except you got rid of something you didn't need, and you got something you did need. If it were true that we could do that, we would be a freer people. We wouldn't have as much accountability to the IRS. We wouldn't have as much oversight by the IRS. But it would also be true that we would not have as much wealth as we do. We'd have what we needed, and maybe a little bit to give to somebody else. But few of us want to go back to those days. Listen, as your pastor, I don't want you to pay me in chickens. Y'all understand that, right? I'm not asking for that. I'm just telling you, if we worked that system, it would be better. In large measure, it is the economic policies of the nation which determine the value of the currency. The denarius was used in ancient Israel because it was the currency of Rome, not only because Rome forced it upon them, but because Israel knew, hey, this money's worth a little bit more. That's a little better. If the exchange rate only comes at the borders of the Roman Empire, which stretched from sea to shining sea, if it only comes there, then there's stability of the currency within the empire. I don't have to worry about changing money here and going to this stall and buying some lettuce and then going over here and buying some fish, and I got to have different money for each one of them because they're operating differently. Everybody used the same money. Participating in the economic pattern of the empire was more valuable to the Jews than they would have ever imagined. That's why they stayed there. There were fewer changes and fewer chances to inflate prices. So all of Israel used the denarii for regular commerce. And it could be reclaimed by Rome at any time. It was Caesar's inscription and Caesar's image on the coin. Well, then Jesus says, give to God what is God's. What has God's inscription on it? Now, we might be tempted to think of the shekel. But listen, the Jews, especially the Pharisees and the priests, were wise enough not to try and create an image of God. The shekel didn't have God's picture on it because, one, nobody knows what God looks like, and two, it violated the first 3 commandments, I think, if you put an image, try to create an image of God on there. So when Jesus says, give to God what belongs to Him, what does He mean? He's not talking about the temple image. What has the inscription and the image of God? Well, isn't it us? In the early pages of the Bible narrative, we are described as being formed in the image and likeness of God. Humanity alone, of all creation, was formed in the image and likeness of God. We were created especially to bear His image. Now, the diversity of plant and animal life on this planet pays homage to a God who's very creative. And all you have to do is look at giraffes and hippopotamuses, and you go, now God was thinking outside the box when He made that. But none of those animals bears His image. They give testimony to His creativity, but they are not made in the image of God. You, church, we, humanity, are made in His image. Jesus is saying to the Herodians, to the Pharisees, and to His disciples, give yourself to God. You bear His image. You were made in His likeness. You have been stamped with the potential to be more valuable than any stack of coins could ever equal. The temporary power of this world may belong to the civil authorities, but you belong to God. Amen. Give Him what bears His image. You belong to the spirit world, or at least you should be willing to give yourself to God, who can initiate you into the spirit world, who can give you His Holy Spirit to live in you and dwell in you. Yes. Worship Him and honor Him with all that you do, with all that you are. Amen. Adam Clark gives us this warning in his commentary on this passage. He says, remember, if Caesar should intrude into the things of God and coin a new creed or broach a new gospel to affect and rule the conscience while he rules the state, in these things Caesar must not be obeyed. Caesar, the king, the president, the government, is trying to take the things of God, and they must not get them. Give not, therefore, he says, God's things to Caesar, and give not Caesar's things to God. It has come back to haunt us, I fear. Where once we were a people who broke free from a government which tried to determine and dictate our worship, we are seeing that our present government is moving ever closer to trying to dictate the essence of our worship once again. It is willing to try and sear our consciences to make us believe things which are false, and worship and serve the creeds which are in vogue and fashion for this contemporary society. We must not give God's place to anyone else. Yes, we need to render to the government the things that belong to the government. The things that belong to this world, the government can have and can take, but do not give the government what only God can give you.
Amen.
Your heart and soul belong to God. Do not give the most valuable things to those who would simply misuse them or abuse them. God deserves our highest praise.
He does.
Our worship should be reserved for the King of Kings
Yes.
and the Lord of Lords.
Yes.
The laws of heaven always have and always will supersede any law of man. We have the duty to resist them. We have the honor to ignore them when they intrude into the realm that is not theirs. But if the government asks you to pay more tax, pay the tax. Take every exemption you can legally. If they give you a way out, I think it's okay to take it. But if they give you a way in, you better take that too. Yes, God has given to mere men the authority and the power for certain things in this world. Render unto Caesar, Jesus said, that which is Caesar. And while we may not like the things that the government does, we may not like the things that our governors say, they have power. They have authority given by God. We may not agree with them. We may not agree with them always. And we may not always feel like we have the power to change those things. But if they do not intrude on the eternal, if they are not telling us how to pray, how to worship, what books to read, where we can read those particular books, we have a right and a duty to Caesar. But it's limited. Our right and our duty to God is unlimited. It extends over everything that we have, over all that we do, and it extends from now and forevermore. Rest assured, God will have His way, and everyone who stands against Him will fall. Perhaps Jesus has said it best in another place. In Matthew chapter 10, He says, "Do not be afraid of those who can kill the body, but cannot hurt the soul. Rather, be afraid of the one who is able to destroy both body and soul in an everlasting hell." Honor the rulers, but reserve your highest allegiance to God Almighty. And render unto God that which bears His image, His likeness. And I'm sure that you will find that knowing the difference